preparation for consequences.
From people making the news.
If the North will be saved a lot of trouble, I think it is important that they should come together.
To those it affects.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines.
Most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. The top stories in Al Jazeera. The United Nations has unanimously voted to impose immediate sanctions on the Libyan regime. It comes as anti-Gaddafi protesters close in on the capital, Tripoli. But the Libyan leader is defiant, saying he won't leave. Fresh fighting broke out in the Tunisian capital, Tunis, between security forces and demonstrators. The violence comes as Mohamed Ghannouchi announced he will step down as prime minister. Two Iranian opposition leaders under unofficial house arrest since February have reportedly been abducted. A human rights group says Mehdi Karoubi and the 2009 presidential candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi are in grave danger. Well, let's cross now to Washington, D.C. and talk to Genevieve Abdo, the director of the Iran program at the Century Foundation. Thanks for joining us. What do we know about the fate of these two men?
Thank you. Well, we don't have much information other than what your correspondent reported. There are reports coming out of Iran that they could have been taken to some sort of safe house. They've been removed from their houses, according to witnesses in Iran. And this, of course, is very dangerous.
Do we know what the government is planning to do there? Because they were under house arrest. Was the government planning to actually take them into custody?
Well, I think that the government has a problem because they don't want to create martyrs out of these two men, who, of course, are the great symbols of the Green Movement. Yet they also want to take them out of operation. The strategy now of the opposition in general in Iran is that they want to have, or they want to try at least, to have continuous, spontaneous protests. The last of which were called for by Mr. Mousavi and Mr. Karoubi. So they still have a lot of power to mobilize people onto the streets. And that's what the regime wants to try to prevent, on the one hand, while not making them martyrs on the other, because this, of course, will just arouse a lot more protests than we've seen in recent days. So I think that they want to make them irrelevant. Maybe they will disappear. Maybe we won't hear from them again. But I think at this point, they probably do not want to take them into custody, in a prison at least.
Right. Is the government's strategy to paint the Green Movement as a more radical group, to try and blur the line between the Green Movement and, say, organizations like the People's Mujahideen of Iran, the MKO?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, this is what the Interior Minister stated on state television last week. He took this whole sort of connection to a new level, saying that, in fact, that the leaders of the Green Movement were part of the MKO. And this, of course, is not true. But you also have a situation where the MKO in the West, in Europe, in the United States, is also trying to make the connection for themselves that they're part of the Green Movement, which is not correct. So I think that what's happening in Iran, why it's dangerous for the leaders of the Green Movement, is that historically, as we know, the MKO has been a severe enemy of the regime, and people who have been accused of being connected to the MKO have been executed. I mean, that's the penalty for sedition. So I think that we're reaching a very different and new phase, and it's quite serious that these leaders are being tied to the MKO.
Okay, ma'am, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
New Zealand will begin to bury victims of the earthquake on Monday. At least 148 people were killed in last week's quake in Christchurch. 50 more are still unaccounted for. The dead and missing include people from 20 nations. The first burial service is planned for a 5-month-old victim. Heavy rains caused a hillside to collapse in Bolivia's capital, destroying 150 homes. Residents in the La Paz neighborhood began evacuating on Saturday. There were no casualties. According to officials, 44 people have been killed in recent weeks by flooding and mudslides. The 83rd Annual Academy Awards ceremony is set to begin in a couple of hours from now. The King's Speech star, Colin Firth, arrived on the red carpet just moments ago. His film is up for 12 nominations, including Best Picture. Other films expected to do well are The Social Network, Black Swan and Toy Story 3. Let's join Al Jazeera's Rob Reynolds, who's in Hollywood on that red carpet. Rob joins us now. Rob, what's the buzz there on the red carpet?
Well, the buzz is really starting to buzz a little bit louder right now, and things are really getting underway. You know, the show is going to start fairly soon, so some of the major actors who are up for awards are filtering through. We saw Jesse Eisenberg, who's up for an award for Best Actor from The Social Network. We spoke just a minute ago to Jackie Weaver. She's an Australian actress who gave a brilliant performance in the film Animal Kingdom, and she's up for a Best Supporting Actress award. I just want to show you, I'll ask Dennis, our cameraman, just to pan across the scene here so you get a flavor of things. You can see that the red carpet is getting packed with people, actors, actresses, as well as writers and producers, directors, all sorts of people from the motion picture industry. And then if we go just a little bit further, I'm not sure if you can see it, Dennis, but in there you can see how well packed in the news media is. There are people here from all over the world, believe me. And we are packed in like sardines, and we're all trying to grab some of these actors and actresses and other major performers and stars as they come by. Now, the buzz about Best Picture, a lot of people think it's going to be The King's Speech. Why? Because it received a lot of award nominations. It also received a lot of Best Picture awards at other pre-Oscar award ceremonies, such as the Golden Globes. The star of that film, Colin Firth, is also very, very highly tipped to be selected as Best Actor. It's the kind of film a lot of people think that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences really like. And for Best Actress, we're looking, many people are betting on Natalie Portman, the star of Black Swan. We'll get you all of the results as soon as we can. For now, I'm Rob Reynolds in Hollywood.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Rob there on the red carpet. Back to Libya now and the advance of opposition forces there. As more cities come under control, the ring around Muammar Gaddafi appears to be tightening. So just what are the options for the embattled Libyan leader? Lawrence Lee reports.
So what next for Gaddafi? Assuming he will not go voluntarily, his next moves must surely be predicated on where he believes he still has support and to what extent he can block his opponents from marching against him. A look at Western Libya presents problems for both the opposition fighters and for Gaddafi. The coastal road from the east is blocked at Sirte, Gaddafi's hometown, which he still controls. It's not a big place, but the roads either side of it are said to be controlled by armed forces loyal to Gaddafi. As such, it presents the biggest obstacle to forces from the east moving on Tripoli. Yet west of Sirte and still east of Tripoli, the rebels are said to now hold Misurata. The town has been the scene of days of heavy fighting, with the city falling and then being counter-attacked by pro-Gaddafi forces. But he now seems to have lost the army and therefore the town. Just as significant is the town of Zawiya, just west of Tripoli. Geographically, it's crucial. Latest reports from the town of 200,000 say after days of heavy fighting, the rebels are in charge in the centre, but the pro-Gaddafi forces are surrounding it. It's hardly surprising Gaddafi wants it back. If the rebels do keep control, it would leave Tripoli in a pincer. So what of the situation in the capital? The most recent images from foreign media invited by the Gaddafis suggest hasty attempts to clean up the centre and an area around Gaddafi's stronghold still said to be under his control. But contrary to Gaddafi's claims, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that Tripoli is not stable, and some reports have suggested dozens killed in clashes. Scenes from some of the poor suburbs like AlJazeera in eastern Tripoli seem to suggest the police have simply melted away. It all lends weight to reports from Tripoli that Gaddafi's forces have been trying to pay local men to take up arms against the insurgency. There's no question the ground upon which Gaddafi built his empire is slipping away. His military options look increasingly limited. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Foreign governments are pulling their citizens out of Libya by whatever means possible. Harry Smith reports on a covert desert operation by the German government.
British oil workers arriving in Malta after being rescued in a military operation shrouded in secrecy. Details are still sketchy, but it's believed 2 British Air Force transport planes entered Libyan airspace without permission. The British refused to reveal exact locations, but it's believed an airfield at Nafura was used to rescue 150 stranded oil workers. Soldiers from the elite SAS regiment were apparently on board, and the evacuees were then flown to safety in Malta. And in the last few hours, the British Ministry of Defence have confirmed that 150 civilians have been evacuated from other areas in Libya.
It was scheduled to be 65, but in the end there was about 130 got on.
Really?
Yeah.
And
we were sitting in the aisles, it was very cramped, but we were just glad to be out of there and getting on the flight.
The British, along with other governments, have also sent warships to Tripoli and Benghazi in attempts to bring out their citizens. But it's thought more rescue missions will be needed to airlift hundreds more oil workers stranded in the south.
As I said, there's still people in the desert, so I can't say too much. I can't say where I came from, etc., etc. Because the guys down there are still doing an excellent job to gather all the guys together and get them evacuated.
The Foreign Office here in London has come in for severe criticism for what's perceived to be its slow response to the plight of Britons trapped in Libya. An official I spoke to a short time ago declined to comment on this latest rescue mission, but said they remain deeply concerned for the plight of other Britons trapped in remote areas of Libya. Harry Smith, Al Jazeera, London.
And the crisis in Tunisia has claimed another victim. French Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie has resigned after weeks of pressure over her links to the former President Ben Ali. Andrew Potter reports.
A happy holiday in Tunisia for French Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie. But the break she took in December and the last weeks of President Ben Ali's rule are unlikely to remain fond memories. Alliot-Marie's been forced to resign for this, the latest in a series of scandals she's been involved in.
Avec le Premier Ministre François Fillon.
With the Prime Minister, François Fillon, we have decided to reorganise the ministries that deal with our diplomacy and our defence. Alain Juppé, a former Prime Minister, a man of experience who has already carried out the job to unanimous acclaim, will be Foreign Minister.
She's not the only French minister to take advantage of questionable free holidays. Prime Minister François Fillon took his family on a New Year's holiday to the Nile resort of Aswan, courtesy of Egypt's soon-to-be deposed President Hosni Mubarak. Alliot-Marie became pressured after it emerged she travelled to Tunisia on a private jet, owned by a businessman with alleged ties to Ben Ali, weeks before he was pushed from power. But with growing turmoil in the Middle East, the timing couldn't have been worse. Both politicians were hammered in the French press, which then took aim at an unpopular president.
It goes back a long time. It's not only Michel Alliot-Marie. The whole French foreign policy is in disarray, and we can date it to Nicolas Sarkozy's arrival to power.
Alain Juppé becomes foreign minister again after holding the post in the mid-90s under Sarkozy's mentor Jacques Chirac. Sarkozy will be hoping the reshuffle will help stop the scandals which are severely damaging his chances of re-election next year. Andrew Potter, Al Jazeera.
This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making headlines. The United Nations has unanimously voted to impose immediate sanctions on the Libyan regime. It comes as anti-Gaddafi protesters close in on the capital, Tripoli, but there remain pockets of pro-Gaddafi camps scattered across the country. The Libyan leader is defiant, saying he won't leave. Reports from western Libya say troops loyal to Gaddafi are preparing for a counter-offensive in the city of AlJazeera. The city's centres currently in the hands of anti-Gaddafi forces. These are the latest pictures from the city, just 50 kilometres west of the capital, Tripoli. Fresh fighting has broken out in the Tunisian capital, Tunis.